universe discussion. So I like that we stumbled on that video. But he's got a website, GeraldSchroeder.com. That's where this video comes from. He's only got 3 videos posted on there. Proof of Heaven in 8 minutes, Proof of God in 5 minutes, and this Age of the Universe, which is just kind of a synopsis of his belief system on that, or synopsis of some of the things we've learned. So I thought it'd be a good review, and then I want to ask you if you have understanding of all this and maybe have discussion back and forth, if we can. So this would be, yes?
Conflict between the Bible and sin.
Yeah. I think his kid did this. His kid is, I noticed that. So, I don't know. Since when?
Maybe it's science.
It's supposed to be science. Good one. See, she's the smartest one in the room. All right, go ahead, play it. I'm going to drink my coffee.
Hello, my name is Jerry Schroeder. I'm talking about the idea of confluence or conflict between Torah and Tevet, between Torah and the way the Torah sees the world and the way the science sees the world. And in today's session that I gave where I was teaching, a student came up and said, can you please tell me just in like 5 minutes the idea of how 14 billion years, which science measures as the age of the universe, can also equal 6 24-hour days, which Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 says. God creates the universe, first sentence of the Bible. By verse 26, 5.5 days after that first sentence, we have Adam, and we're told that takes 5.5 days, and science says 14 billion years. And the answer lies in the subtlety of the text. First, we have to get understanding. All of ancient commentary tells us that the 6 days of Genesis chapter 1 is broken into 6 days, divided into 6 days, by the statement there is evening and morning. The days are numbered. Those days are 24 hours each. They are not long periods of time, yet the universe is 14 billion years old. How do we understand that to be the case? And they're both literally true. That's what I want to get to do in the next about 4 to 5 minutes, okay? Both Nachmanides in the year 1250 and Rashi in the year 1090 tell us that the days are 24 hours each. They tell us that time is created at the creation, but then there's a caveat added. They say, however, only when matter forms from the energy of creation. These are the words. The first creation wasn't stuff, according to ancient commentary. The first, it was something so thin, it had no essence. Dakma od ein bo mamash. You couldn't grab it, but it turned into something that you could, the solid matter. That's Einstein's famous E equals mc squared. We're talking 1,000 years ago, okay? And it's in the text. Come to class and we'll spend hours on this, if you like. My books also talk about it. So here we go. The Bible numbers the days, and here is the key. It is Nachmanides that points it out. At the end of each day, the day is numbered. Evening and morning, 1 day. Evening and morning, a second day. Evening and morning, a third day as the days go by. Second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. But the first day isn't first. It's day 1. The reason being that the Bible told, not that my idea, that the Bible sees time from the beginning looking forward. For the 6 days of Genesis, the Torah does not look back from Sinai where Moses gets the Torah. It sees from the beginning, and therefore it says day 1 because there wasn't a second day. We're told that if the text were looking backward from Sinai, there had been hundreds of thousands of days between the creation of the universe and Moses on Sinai. So they would have said a first day, because by the time you get to the Sinai, there'd be hundreds of thousands of second days that had passed. So you could say a first day, like the First World War. No one called the First World War the First World War during the First World War, except the pessimists. They happen to be right. But the Second World War came along. Everyone calls the First World War the First World War, no longer the Great War, the Big War. So we look back in time. So the question is, as the universe expands, the NASA diagram, which you've all seen so often, NASA type in NASA on Google, then type in WMAP, the initials of this satellite, you get this diagram. Every word is from NASA. We look back in time, we measure 14 billion years. The Torah sees time from a totally not human perspective, from right near the beginning, not right at the beginning where we see this inflation, but right at the very, just a squidgen of time after, about 100,000th of a second after, when the first matter forms. Because that's what the text tells us. When matter forms, time grabs a hold. Nachmai, Hazman Nivra, time is created at the creation, but time grabs hold with matter. Mishiyesh, it flows man. It's about 100,000th of a second, approximately. And we have the first matter, called protons. Now I know the energy level of the universe at which the first matter forms. So I know this number. I know the energy level now because scientists measure the energy density of space today. That ratio is how much space has stretched. This is a gigantically large number. This is quite a small number. That ratio is how much time has stretched. And it doesn't stretch linearly. Notice, first of all, this exponential expansion. But it's the rate of change is nonlinear. As I move my fingers apart, although I'm going to move them apart at a constant rate, the fractional change in space is very different. I'll say double each time space doubles. Double, 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 double. Although the universe is expanding more or less at the same rate, the fractional rate of change varies. And that fractional rate of change can be described with many equations. The equation that I use is the most common equation in the universe, the one that describes the radioactive decay of all atoms. It is essentially the equation that got us to be us and the matter to be matter. It's A equals A0, e to the minus lambda t, for those that know the math. The A0 determines the answer. It is totally, 100% a science number. It has nothing to do with Jerry Schroeder, nothing to do with these calculations. And what we discover is that this ratio, as the universe expands, the perception of time becomes warped, put it this way. When, let us say this is the amount of distance that light will travel, let's say in a second, it's because it's vastly big, okay? It's the amount of distance light travels has nothing to do with its frequency. It is totally the speed of light, which is constant. So when the energy is high, there are many waves here, because the energy of a wavelength, the energy of light is determined by its frequency, which makes sense. Which looks more energetic? Or, of course, that's Planck's famous discovery. So when the universe is small and hot, the number of waves would be like, you couldn't save them fast enough in here. But when the universe is stretched out and much colder, then it's more like tick, tick. And those waves are the ticking of the cosmic clock. The ratio averaged over all of them based on what comes out of this equation. It's not the instantaneous ratio, but it's averaged over them all. It's much more interesting to see the actual calculation, which I'll show you in a moment. But the ratio overall is 900 billion, which means that if I had on the average, if I had 900 billion seconds worth of history, I don't know, the dinosaurs. From the Bible's point of view, it would be 1 second, and those 900 billion seconds would be squeezed as a video and super fast forward. If I had 900 billion hours, I don't know what that would be, it would be 1 hour. 900 billion days of our time would be 1 day. And what's amazing is, with no trick whatsoever, when you condense the 14 billion years by the 900 billion, which is what spins out of this equation with no control over me, averaged over the time, the 14 billion years become 5.5 days.
He's a character. Jerry. Did you hear Jerry Schroeder? Can you click back to the website? Show by the website. Obviously, this stuff appeals to those that have a. Oh, what happened to the? Go. Yeah, that's where I was. That's where I pulled this up at first. Yeah. Okay. That should still be open in the other browser. There it is. Okay, go to the top, please. There you go. So click on articles. If you want to learn more about this stuff and study other aspects of it, not just the age of the universe, that's not all that he has written about. I found it fascinating. His last book was God on God. And that's the one that talked about the underlying information system for all of creation. And he tied it into what, he says Torah, right? What the Torah calls wisdom. By wisdom, God created. And wisdom, if you look at it from the standpoint of data, packets of data, makes it 100% falls right in line with the Bible. That was a very good read because a bunch of different disciplines in science have come to the same conclusion. There's something that underlies the quantum. There's something that underlies some wisdom, I won't say wisdom, they call it information system that underlies organic biology, especially at the cellular level. There's something that underlies the thinking process of the brain, because our brain is just, a biological organism, right? But there's some aspect to it that science cannot explain from the physical realm, and they've all three independently come to the realization that there's something underlying all that, what the Bible calls a wisdom, which to me is very interesting from the fact that we have these verses that say by wisdom God created, and wisdom does all these different things that unless we knew that, we'd be like, I wonder, what does that mean? So he's a smart guy. Now, don't take everything he says to be gospel because he's a guy, he's a man. But I think that he's done his due diligence and his research. His books are well annotated and supported. And the statements he makes as far as the science part of it are all explained and backed up. So I think that it's highly unlikely that he's wrong, especially since he knows the Torah pretty well and the Hebrew pretty well. But I just wanted to show you that there's more resources on his website, and there's one free online book too. I have not downloaded and read it. Those are the books that he's written there to the left. They're on Amazon. Yeah, speculations concerning quantum physics. Probably is. Well, the good thing about his writing style is it's not technical. He's not writing for a bunch of scientists. He's writing for the average layman. So he makes everything pretty understandable. So you might even understand it, being the average layman. No, she's way smart. So did you understand what he was saying about time and matter and the perspective?
Without matter, time cannot take a hold of something.
Well, that's how he explained it, yeah.
And yet, we're perpetually, this universe is perpetually moving into nothingness.
No, that's not true. It's expanding. That's what he was talking about at a constant rate, which is really important to understand because where you're viewing the universe from is relative to how you perceive time passing. So from the Earth perspective, time passes differently than it would at the center of the universe, even now. Time passes differently in different parts of the universe because of the magnitude of gravity. On the event horizon of a black hole, time will pass very, very, very slowly. If you'd fly a spaceship to the edge of a black hole and return, and let's say it took you a day to get there, and you spend a day on the edge of the black hole, you're going to come back and everybody you knew is going to be dead because time passes so much differently because of the gravity on the black hole. You'll think one day goes by, but that's not what happens. One day goes by for you, you age one day, your cellular functions change because of the gravity.
Have you ever watched the TV show Andromeda with Kevin Sorbo?
I have
It
not.
explains that time difference that happens at the event horizon
Yeah.
really well.
So does Jerry in his books, and so does a man named Humphreys wrote Starlight in Time, which is an excellent book, but it's full of a lot of math. So if you want to dig into that, dig into the math, you can. You can borrow it. It's in my library. So not just from your perspective in the universe, but also from where you're at in the universe and what kind of gravity you're experiencing, time passes differently. I mean, it's a second is a second, but how long it takes that second to go by is not constant. You understand what I'm saying? If we're looking at a unit of measurement as being a constant, time is different. If we look at the unit of measurement being, well, you could, in that regard, the speed of light would be different, which is why we know time is different, because the light speed changes in a black hole. It's because of the gravitational pull, so they're affected by that. Our minuscule gravity on Earth does not affect it, but now I'm kind of wandering off into black hole territory. They're kind of their own little cosmos in the middle of a solar system or galaxy, but and we've only seen the results of them in a lot of what we believe is postulated, but you know, it just proves the point that he's trying to make, that in the first 24 hours from the point of the Big Bang, 8 billion years went by of expansion from our perspective. And then it doubled again, and 4 billion, then 2 billion, then 1 billion, and 500 million. Which, that's why he did this thing. So every time that happens, it takes longer, or takes less, it expands less. And it's all a matter of the perspective. So the billions of years going by is from our perspective, but the 24 hours from the perspective of at the point of the event happening. So how do we know all this? He showed you those waves, the sine wave, and the frequency of the how do you say frequency? How often those humps happen is called the frequency. That's actually a alternating current sine wave. So in our outlets we have 60 hertz or 60 cycles per second. So if we would graph time versus amplitude, which would be the voltage, we would have 60 of those if we graphed a second. So that's frequency. So we all run everything at 60 60 cycles, that's the frequency. So the frequency changes because that's an interval, but the expansion rate doesn't change. So because it expands, the frequency is affected. So that's why the perspective of time will change. So things happen much slower on the edge than they do in the middle, because the middle is constant. That's still that crazy high frequency. So what I found fascinating in reading through him, which is why he really got my attention, because there's a lot of guys that have written on some of this stuff, and I'll be honest with you, if you read the creationist stuff after you delve into the science side, a lot of it sounds pretty infantile. Really, it really does. Like just kind of grasping at a straw. Well, God just made the light like that. Oh, yeah, he could, but why? I mean, really, is that the best you can do? You're just going to say, well, that's the way it is. And I understand totally about pressing that I believe button, as we used to say in nuclear power school, because some things you'd go, really? I would have thought the opposite. Nope, and then you prove it mathematically and you go, I'll be danged. I don't know if I believe that, but yeah, I need to believe it for this. And sure enough, after working with all that stuff for a long enough time, you get familiar, and that kind of belief is no longer needed because you've established it as a scientific fact, right? So I certainly know about that, but what was I saying? I lost my train of thought. Wait, I have a cure for that. I usually have one of these before I come.
So it's the train bag?
Oh, I remember. See, it worked. What I really found fascinating about the way he approaches it is that he's gone and he mentioned what do you call him? Ramban, which is the abbreviation for the Rabbi Nachmanides, which wrote a bunch of commentary in the 8th century, 8th or 9th, and then the Kabbalist Rashi, you'll see that annotated in a lot of different, in the Talmud and a lot of different places. Rashi says this, and so they're the chief commentators, two of a group of chief commentators that are well respected. And what caught my eye was how he read what they wrote and realized that what they were saying was the same thing that his science was proving. For instance, they made the distinction 1,000 years ago that the language there that says, and that was the first day, was the beginning of time, the invention and creation of time. Out of the text, with no scientific measurements, with no reason to be defending their position or his position, Nachmanides came to that realization, which, boy, that certainly fits the whole what science is telling us, doesn't it? And then the first day, and then day 2, day 3. And his point was that Moses would have been, when he received Genesis on Mount Sinai, because he authored the first 5 books of the Bible, well past the creation. So he's looking back, first day, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. He would have had 900 billion days. It wouldn't have been day 2 if they were talking about things from the perspective of the earth. He would have had a lot of different days. They were looking backwards. So looking backwards, we're looking from Earth time. From Earth time, we see 14 billion years, and we're 5.5 days in. And I mentioned that last time, right? Man was made on the 6th day. Well, how long is that 6th day? So, well, let's count. First one is 8 billion, right? Somebody count them for me. 4 billion additional. 2 billion. How many days is that?
3,
1 billion.
4,
Half a billion.
5.
6.
Then we're halfway.
Quarter billion.
And he says we're halfway through the.
Quarter billion. Quarter billion years on the sixth day, right? Man was made during the sixth day. That's why he says 5.5 days. We're not even through that sixth day yet. So if that's correct, now, we go into the Greek and we go to turn to the scripture and we say, well, 6 days and the seventh day, we're looking for that seventh day of rest, right? That's what the writer in Hebrews says. That seventh day, that Sabbath rest. Well, that Sabbath rest, is that tied to that same timetable? I sort of believe it is. So we're going to have to finish out that sixth day before the kingdom is turned over to the Lord and we have that seventh day of rest. Because the kingdom established is not the seventh day. The seventh day is when the kingdom, the 1,000 years is done and the kingdom is turned over. That's what I believe anyways. 1,000 years is nothing but as a day, right? So all this is very interesting from the perspective of what the rabbis taught about all this stuff when they had no reason to even be broaching this subject, but studying that part of the Bible, these are the conclusions they came to. And here we are, 900, 800 years later, 500 for Rashi years later, with all this great science, all the stuff we've figured out. We understand quantum mechanics. We understand the quantum. Otherwise, this would not work. This is based on quantum, right? Yeah, you wouldn't have a cell phone if we didn't figure a lot of this stuff out. AI is based on quantum. Siri and all that, if we didn't understand quantum, you wouldn't have any of that. It's all quantum computing. Look how small it's gotten. There's more computing power in this phone than was on the first, by far, by a factor in the hundreds, than the computing power both on Earth and in the space capsule that went to the moon. Way more. That was rooms full of computers. What we wouldn't even call them computers anymore. So I think that gives the position credence when the Jews figured all this stuff out with no impetus to do so. They really didn't have a reason to, but studying the text for what it was, these are the conclusions they came to. And I've got Maimonides' book in my library, and it's pretty fascinating, and there's a lot of stuff to dig through. If you want to spend some time verifying this, that would be an endeavor very, very, very worth the time. But then you would have the inclination that I do to talk about it a lot because I think it's fascinating. So from all the stuff, the last 3 weeks, we watched this little video today, and then the longer video we broke up into 2 parts before that, and I brought a lesson even before that. Where's your thinking on this? Is anybody completely, totally lost? Anybody like, well, I kind of understand this, but I don't understand that? Is there any questions that you need or clarifications? I will try. I'm not as brilliant as this guy, obviously, but I'm not even close.
He's first.
Justin.
I can understand it a little tiny bit because it makes a little bit of sense. Because it's kind of like, mainly because it's astronomy and I'm not.
Well,
I'm not
it's
skilled
physics
in
and
it,
it's
but-
astronomy and it's a lot of physics. Yeah, it's a lot of physics.
But
Well, I would suggest if you got this much understanding, try reading one of the books. Try reading the first one, Genesis and the Big Bang. I've got it in my library. You can read it. You can start today when you get home.
Well, I'm so glad to hear my dad.
David?
That, what he said just reinstated what I thought for a long time is time is fluid. Time is constantly moving forward because we see it that way. And it was proven.
Well, I think we all believe that because not a one of us has seen time go the other way. I've read a lot of books about that, but never seen it in my life. Time keeps going on. The one thing that's certain is that the world waits for nobody. No matter what our crisis is or what we're going through, the world marches on. The world being time moves. And with movement, change always comes. So if this confirmed that for you, great. Great. Val, you had your hand up?
You already answered the question. I was gonna ask, out of the books that you've read, which would you recommend to read first?
Well, actually, once you read one, you probably want the rest. But Genesis and the Big Bang deals with this stuff more. The Hidden Face of God, it's been a long time since I read them, like 15, 18 years. The Hidden Face of God is a little bit different perspective. And some of them have repetitive information that he has to make it a complete unit. He has to repeat some things. I think the hominid idea is repeated. You know what I'm talking about? That's in the first video when he talked about the hominids. That's what he calls them in his book. He didn't call them that in the video, but non-spirit endued human beings. We would call them human-like, which is what hominid means, that are not the sons of God. Isn't it interesting that the Bible talks about the sons of God and the daughters of men?
Also, there's a deeper meaning of that.
Depends. Oh, in the language there is, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's what that meant. Okay.
Well, when Cain slew Abel, where did he go?
Outside a garden.
We're already
East of Eden, right?
Already outside. You went
He went east of Eden. To where?
The cities.
What city? And who was in the city?
How did he get married?
And nobody had a decent answer until this guy. And it's like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But a lot of the books I've read are just they're like opinion. It's like, this is my opinion, and there's nothing to substantiate. What I like about this is that he's like, and this is why. He's able to
From both perspectives.
correct.
Right.
Correct.
So you wondered where caveman came from? Those are hominids. Do you think evolution's true? See, that's the next thing. Oh boy, you're opening up a can when you do that. Because what if we had biologically evolved hominids that God used and gave the Neshim and made Adam?
Why not?
Because that's what he proposes in his books. Adam was different, according to Mr. Schroeder in his book. Adam was different not because he was a hominid, but because of that he was endued with part of God. And he was formed, like the Bible says, but he was in the likeness of the other of God's creations, which would have been the hominids, which have been around for a long time. But he was given became a nephesh because of the spirit he was given, which is different from the spirit that the hominids and the animals get. And he explained that in the first video. The words are different. That's why your dog is not a person.
He thinks he is.
He thinks he is, I know.
And he would like you to treat him with a little more respect.
Well, if he didn't act like an old man and change all of a sudden. Like I got to touch him every time he needs to go out at 2 a.m. Just I open the door, you go out the door. I am not awake. It's all about me, not about him.
Oh, golly.
But yeah, but dogs, cats, they're not people. They're different. We all know that.
Yes.
But it's hard for us to say why. I mean, we can point to things. Well, he doesn't talk, but he does, because he'll come up and he'll speak to me in his dog language when he wants to go out, right? Or butt me in the leg with his nose. That's a way of communicating. He is communicating. Or yeah, whap. Whatever your animal does, or you've trained him to do. A lot of times it's what we train him to do. So they speak, they let us know what they want, but yeah, I'm not carrying on a philosophical conversation, because as soon as he would start, he'd go, ball. Right? Because their thinking process is different. Yeah, squirrel. Shiny thing. So that's what he explains in that, is the difference between humanity and all the other of his creations, including the hominids, which is where Cain went and produced offspring with. Now think of the implications of that. Luckily, the flood is the great equalizer, right? Because only humans got off of the ark on the flood, only as we understand humanity. Hominids are gone since the flood. I don't think any of them were two of every kind. When did the ark happen? I'm just kind of riffing right now because I've thought about this, but not to its logical conclusion. Anyways, food for thought. Genesis and the Big Bang is probably the best one to start with. Another question?
I think it was like 1,000 years after Adam, or more.
More. Did the ark happen? Way more. There's like
Methuselah
3,000 years of time between Adam and the ark.
Okay.
At least 2,500.
There's some generations.
We had I got a timeline when, I'm trying to remember what it said, or
Yeah.
even if it's here. But it seemed to me it started at around 2,000 or 2,500 because they couldn't measure the time prior to that.
According to Usher, Adam was created around 4,400 BC.
Right.
So we're looking at the flood happening. Yeah, you're right. So about 2,500 years later, which geologically also is supported with Pangea and all that. So there's a lot of different ways to go with some of this stuff, to dig into it, to see what the earth tells us, to see what the creation, and doesn't Psalm 19 tell us that we're supposed to do that, to observe the creation, to see his glory, to see his power? Well, if we have Pangea, wouldn't that be a demonstration of his power? So isn't there evidence left here for us to discover? That's how I see it. Yeah, I don't think we need to bring Rosh Hashanah into this, but you could. So as far as science in the Bible goes, what's the next question you want to tackle?
In the realm of science versus the Bible,
Mhm.
the flood.
The flood. Okay.
Because I read a book and they were talking about how mountains over time get higher. And I had this discussion with Daniel because he's like, well, the science has disproven the flood. And I said, yeah, but they're doing it from the perspective of the mountains are the height that they were 1,000,000 years ago. And I said, but they weren't. Mountains grew, when Pangea happened, mountains increased. So the mountains weren't as tall as they were at the time of the flood. It's much lower. And I can't remember, it was a long time ago that I read it, but it was one of those books that's like, well, that makes sense to me. That's,
Okay.
you know, That makes sense to me.
Well, look for some stuff. I don't have much on that, but that'd be a good thing to delve into for sure. Yes, Emmy.
And then, well, talking about the flood, another thing is if you look at the historical, every country, like China and India and stuff, they all have a flood of some sort.
Yeah, they all have a flood story.
A
Yep.
flood story.
Every culture.
Even South American.
Yeah, like all the cultures have some sort of flood story. Wouldn't that equate there was a giant flood all over?
Most likely. It's not proof positive, but yeah.
Some food for thought, though.
Okay. Well, I will try to get some stuff together for flood for next week, and we can talk about that. You guys do the same, and we will have a good discussion then if everybody is trying to prepare. So we'll leave off with our age of the universe and understand that the Bible is full of a lot of things that supports exactly what everybody has been proving. All right. And we'll do this one next. Okay?
What are you pointing at?
My sermon. My next lesson.